Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a jam-packed show for you today with some on-the-ground reporting from the Democratic National Convention, which is well underway. We're going to be talking about it here all week, including on Fridays. We're both hosting the Friday show this week.
All week, literally every single day.
Working hard for you, the viewer, so let's get right to it. Yesterday night, we were treated to the unexpected arrival of Kamala Harris making an appearance. Let's check that out. Then there was the very late President Joe Biden. Was Sleepy Joe snubbed again? Some people on the right certainly think so. This was, after all, supposed to be his big night, but he did not start speaking until extremely late. His remarks began about 10:25 p.m. Central Time, meaning he was outside of primetime hours. Let's watch some of his speech.
As your president, I've been determined to keep America moving forward, not going back, to stand against hate and violence in all its forms, to be a nation where we not only live with but thrive on diversity, demonizing no one, leaving no one behind, and becoming the nation that we profess to be. I also ran to rebuild the backbone of America, the middle class. Let me ask you, are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, President and Vice President of the United States? MAGA Republicans found out the power of women in 2022. And Donald Trump is going to find out the power of women in 2024. I'm proud that I've kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and that taps in to the full talent of our nation. The most diverse cabinet in history, including the first black woman of South Asian descent to serve as vice president. And will soon serve as the 47th president of the United States.
Biden went on to explain that he's passing the torch to Kamala Harris.
Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. We've not only gotten to know each other, we've become close friends. She's tough, she's experienced, and she has enormous integrity, Her story represents the best American story. And like many of our best presidents, she was also vice president. That's a joke. But she'll be a president our children can look up to. She'll be a president respected by world leaders because she already is. She'll be a president we can all be proud of. And she will be a historic president who puts her stamp on America's future.
Then the president said, don't worry, he's not angry at the Americans who called on him to step down and not run in 2024.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more. I love my country more. And all this talk about how I'm angry at all those people who said I should step down, that's not true. I love my country more, and we need to preserve our democracy. In 2024, we need you to vote. We need you to keep the Senate. We need you to win back the House of Representatives. And above all, we need you to beat Donald Trump. And elect Kamala and Tim. America, I gave my best to you. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I gave my best to you. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. But I hope you know how grateful I am to all of you.
Now, some criticism I've heard a lot of people on the left have, many people are saying, Robby, that the speeches last night from Biden to AOC just lacked substance. Not a lot of talk about what's on the actual agenda, a very personal night. Let's talk about us and our team and who we are. And I think Biden's speech definitely had that. It also had the vibe of like someone got too drunk, some uncle or dad got too drunk at the family like function. And it's like, all right, everybody, I love you guys. Haven't we had so much fun?
I was a little surprised. Maybe I shouldn't be. It's amazing how actually not bitter he sounded. He just gave an affirming, positive speech to a den of jackals, a pit of vipers, a group of people who stabbed him in the back, who stole from him his ability to run for president again, and he just said, "Love you guys," and they said, "Oh, we love you, Joe." That's the people who did it to him, and he had a smile on his face. It was also way past his bedtime and ours and everyone that he was speaking so late. And a lot of people on the right are suggesting that was a further way to humiliate Joe, is to have him so late that people weren't even watching, that was by design because the DNC doesn't want to have the optics of being associated with Joe Biden at all, given how unpopular he is. So this was like, well, he's got to speak. He's speaking night one. It's really late. Nobody's watching anymore. And now he's gone. He's out. We're done with him. We're moving on. Really not very nice treatment of this guy, but he put up with it, and now the party formally moves on to Kamala Harris.
I'm going to say something that sounds nice, and I just want to be very clear. It's not.
Okay.
Joe Biden, I believe he full-heartedly believed that he was the only guy who could beat Donald Trump. And I think now he has seen that, he's not. Look at the polls. Look at how Kamala Harris is polling nationally. I really think that's what happened. I think that's why he was clinging on. Because going into this, it's very clear he just wanted to be president. And then I think after this term, he grappled with the fact that, yes, he did say he was a transition president. He did say he intended to pass the torch. He wanted to beat Donald Trump. And I think that's where we're at, is he was clinging on to it because he felt he was still the only guy who could beat him.
Well, he was the headliner last night, but there were a lot of other interesting speeches, too, by Hillary Clinton and AOC that we're going to get into with some guests later on the show. But one other moment of his speech that I wanted to highlight was what he said about how the Biden administration shepherded the nation out of COVID. Let's watch what he said about the reopening schools policy during COVID.
Look at their Project 2025. We want to do away with the Department of Education. Well, during the pandemic, common law helped states and cities get back their schools back open. And we gave public school teachers a raise.
So a lot of people on the right are jumping on those remarks, saying that far from helping to reopen schools, Democrats nationally and in various blue municipalities worked extra hard to keep schools closed for as long as possible. Schools were open if they were in red states. If they were private schools, they were more likely to be open. If they were in blue states or they were public schools, they were more beholden to teachers' unions and to Democrats. They stayed shut longer than any other sector of our economy. People went back to work, people were back to bars, people were back to doing things. Schools remained closed, even though kids were the least at risk of a negative COVID health outcome, and schooling is so important. You could make an argument for the opposite, that schools should have remained open even if other things had to shut down, but that's not how it worked. And so there was going to be a lot of, all throughout the night, there was a lot of celebration of how Biden saved us from COVID. But of course, a lot of those policies, I even heard like Chris Wallace, formerly of Fox, but now a CNN person, he said he thought they were engaged in some revisionist history, talking about all these great policies that saved us from COVID.
Yeah, I think about the closing of schools, and I think about how dangerous it is when people in government jeopardize the education of the people, especially the working class, thinking of Reagan's old education advisor saying, we have to ensure that higher education is not something everyone can attain because an educated proletariat would be dynamite. It would be a bad thing. And that's why I think we should all be very cautious that many Republicans are in favor of defunding the Department of Education.
Oh, I'm in favor of that.
I know you are.
Yeah.
And I think it's just very scary to
the Department of
want
Education
people to have access to
it's just a
education.
massive federal bureaucracy that determines who gets various grants. We could fund education. We can fund the schools without the massive federal bureaucracy, and in fact did. The Department of Education is only as old as is only a few decades old. We can do public funding of education without having to administer it on this massive, inefficient federal level.
I'm glad I am sitting next to someone who thinks that, but I don't think Republicans believe that we should keep funding public schools in the same way we are today.
Fund them. There's a difference between funding them and publicly funding them and having them be publicly run. Most Republicans I know support funding public education, but do the governments literally have to run the schools and have all the policies for the schools? And again, at the federal level, why can't we just give the money to the people and let them spend that money on whatever educational option makes the best sense for their individual family or their individual child? That's what I would say we should do. But we will have much more discussion of the DNC coming up on Rising. Stay with us.